My mother-in-law's actions left me absolutely devastated. She not only tried to squeeze into my wedding dress, but she also ruined it completely and refused to take responsibility or even apologize. The day I picked out my wedding dress, my mother-in-law casually remarked, "I wonder if that still fits me?" I jokingly responded, "Maybe, but you're definitely not trying it on." She pushed back, asking why not, and insisted on trying it on just to see how it fits. Despite my attempts to explain that it was my special dress for my big day, she wouldn't listen. Then she started crying, saying she never had a proper wedding. I couldn't hold back. I blurted out, "Oh, that's because you cheated on your fiancé." I instantly regretted the harsh words, but I felt the conversation had crossed a line. What happened next was far worse. She came over to talk things through and excuse herself to the bathroom. I didn't think much of it until I started hearing strange noises coming from my bedroom. I opened the door to find her trying to squeeze into my dress. I froze in shock. As she tugged at the fabric, the seams tore, the zipper snapped, and the sheer backing completely burst open. My heart sank as I watched the dress I had spent thousands of dollars on, plus more for tailoring, being destroyed. I screamed, "What have you done?" She casually dismissed it, saying, "Don't worry, we can fix it." I was beyond furious and asked her why she would even try on my dress after I had explicitly told her no. She said she just wanted to see if it still fit her and, incredibly, that she wanted to experience being a bride. I was speechless, barely able to process the reality of the situation. It was less than 2 months before my wedding, and now I had no idea if I could even get the dress fixed in time. The original tailor I had used had a months-long wait list, and I had been lucky to get an appointment when I did. I looked at her, begging her to understand the severity of what she had done, but she remained completely unbothered, brushing it off as though it wasn't a big deal. As I stood there, in complete disbelief, my fiancé, Brian, overheard the commotion and rushed into the room. He looked at the ruined dress and then at me. "What happened?" he asked. I told him, with a mix of anger and disbelief, that his mother had ruined my dress. He immediately looked horrified and turned to her, telling her she needed to pay for a new dress right away, as the wedding was only weeks away. But my mother-in-law refused. She insisted it wasn't her fault, claiming that my dress was just unreliable and somehow blaming the dress itself for the disaster. She then tried to turn the whole situation around, saying that I should be thanking her because if something went wrong with the dress at the wedding, I would have no time to get a new one. That was the last straw. I snapped, saying, "There wouldn't have been a malfunction because you are 4 sizes bigger than me." Brian tried to reason with her, telling her that we had the dress tailored to fit me perfectly, but she wouldn't listen. She remained obstinate, refusing to take responsibility for what she had done. I demanded that she pay for a new dress since she had destroyed this one, but she just kept refusing. Frustrated and emotionally drained, I stormed out of the room, realizing that this conversation was going nowhere. Brian stayed behind, continuing to argue with his mother. I should have known that planning the wedding would be a nightmare with her around. She had always overstepped boundaries. When Brian and I first started dating, she once told me she would always be the most important woman in his life. I didn't think too much of it until I noticed how she would constantly text him or call during our dates, asking when he'd be coming home, or gossiping with her friends. When I voiced my concerns, he stepped in and set boundaries, which made things more bearable. But my mother-in-law's constant overreach remained a thorn in my side. The dress incident, however, was the breaking point. The next day, I went to the same bridal shop where I had found my original dress, hoping against hope that I would find something in time. I was embarrassed to admit the real reason I needed a new dress, so I told the stylist that my dog had destroyed it. After hours of searching, I finally found a dress I loved. I FaceTimed Brian to show him, but I could tell his mother was in the car with him. I could see her glance at the screen, clearly displeased. When Brian saw the price, he didn't hesitate to say that it was a great deal. But then his mother interjected, saying, "I hope it's more durable than the last one." That one was terrible. I could feel my face turning bright red with embarrassment. She said that in front of the stylist, and I quickly ended the call to avoid further confrontation. Her disregard for my feelings, especially at such a crucial moment, left me feeling completely drained. I couldn't understand how she could be so callous, and the stress of the whole situation was overwhelming. I couldn't help but apologize for my mother-in-law's behavior, even though I knew deep down it wasn't my fault. The stylist, sensing my discomfort, laughed gently and reassured me, saying she'd heard far worse from other brides. But even that small gesture couldn't ease the tension that had started to build between Brian and me in the days that followed. Every conversation felt like we were edging toward a bigger confrontation. The arguments became petty and draining, and what caught me off guard the most was how, over time, Brian began to seem to side with his mom. Out of nowhere, he offered to pay for the new dress, telling me not to worry about it. I told him that no amount of money could fix the damage his mom had done to our relationship. I needed him to set clear boundaries with her, but he couldn't understand. He said he was torn between us, that he loved both of us, and wished we could all get along. 2 weeks before the wedding, we were having dinner when, once again, his mom brought up the dress. She asked where it was, and I coldly replied, "I'm not telling you, so you can ruin this one too." Brian chastised me for being petty and urged me to let it go. But the truth was I couldn't forget what she'd done. Then, out of nowhere, his mom dropped a bombshell. She accused me of trying to steal the last thing in her life that made her happy and said I should be grateful to have her in my life. I was about to respond when the doorbell rang. It was my friend Emily, and Brian explained that she'd been invited to dinner because he'd noticed how tense I'd been in the past weeks. Finally, I felt a sense of relief. For that night, I was able to enjoy my friend's company and focus on the food, not the chaos surrounding the wedding. But the next day, things took a turn when I received a call from Brian's aunt. She told me I needed to stop bringing up the dress, that I was overreacting, and that I should be more understanding because she was living paycheck to paycheck. More calls from family followed, some siding with me, others with Brian's mom. Each time I mentioned it to Brian, his response was always the same. Maybe my mom didn't mean to ruin the dress. It's just a dress, and we've already replaced it. He downplayed everything. And every time we were with his family, he tried to defuse the tension, but it always felt like he was taking his mother's side. As the wedding approached, the distance between Brian and me grew. It felt like we were back in the early days of our relationship, when I was constantly battling for his attention against his mom. One afternoon, we were picking out flowers for my bouquet when his mom insisted on tagging along. I told Brian I didn't want her there, but he said I should let her join because she didn't have anyone else in her life to spend time with. Reluctantly, I agreed. As I picked out a champagne and pink bouquet, my favorite colors, I asked Brian what he thought. He said they looked great, but his mom immediately shot it down. She suggested I should go with red roses because they symbolize passion and romance. Without thinking, Brian agreed with her and told me I should consider her opinion. I was upset but tried to remain calm. I ended up choosing the red roses, though it wasn't what I wanted. As we left, Brian suggested that I should let his mom have more input on the wedding. He said she had a good eye for things, like the flowers, and would probably be helpful with the rest of the planning. He went on to say she just wanted to be involved, that it was important to her. I was stunned. The same woman who had nearly ruined my wedding day was now being invited to help plan it. I couldn't keep it in anymore. I snapped, telling him if he wanted her to be a part of the wedding so badly, he should marry her instead of me. Brian was shocked, insisting he didn't mean it that way, but I couldn't ignore the way he kept siding with her. He painted me as the hostile one every time I voiced my concerns about her overstepping boundaries. I didn't want to argue anymore, so I stayed silent for the rest of the car ride, feeling more isolated than ever. In the final week leading up to the wedding, Brian's mom walked into the living room and casually asked about the catering. I told her we had chosen a local restaurant I loved growing up, but she dismissed it, saying we should have gone with a fancier option to make the event feel more upscale. When I tried to explain that it was my celebration and my choice, she ignored me and asked where the venue was. I showed her the location, and she immediately criticized it, claiming there was too much crime in the area and calling the whole wedding ghetto. She suggested I should have asked her for help planning it. My blood was boiling as I stood up, ready to walk out. She spotted the guest list on my computer and told me I needed to cut it in half because she had more family members who wanted to come. That was the breaking point. I told her to leave it alone. If she had so many issues with my wedding, she didn't have to come. She rolled her eyes and called Brian in. He came in looking confused, and I explained once again how his mom was trying to ruin our wedding. His response, "She's just trying to do her best." I was done. This wasn't about a dress or a wedding anymore. It was about my relationship with Brian, and I didn't know how much more I could take. I could hear the sincerity in Brian's voice as he tried to keep the peace between us, but his mother wasn't having it. She immediately took it as another opportunity to manipulate the situation, saying, "Before you start talking down to my boy, you should understand that I'm only here to help you. Most parents don't get involved in their children's lives, and that's how mistakes are made." Her words cut through me like a knife, and I couldn't hold it together anymore. I stormed upstairs, retreating to our bedroom, where I collapsed onto the bed, tears flooding my eyes. I felt so alone, like no one cared about my feelings, least of all Brian. He didn't come to check on me, not even once. It was as though he couldn't see how much pain I was in. I cried myself to sleep that night, feeling utterly defeated. The day of the wedding arrived, but I wasn't filled with the joy I had expected. The excitement I had once felt had vanished, replaced with a hollow sense of obligation. I wasn't getting the dress I had dreamed of. The flowers I had chosen were in colors I despised, and I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that Brian might not even want to be with me. As I was getting my makeup done, Brian's mother, soon-to-be mother-in-law, walked into the room with my bridesmaids. She was wearing an eggshell-colored dress, and I immediately asked her what she thought she was doing. She responded that it was a family tradition for mothers to wear eggshell-colored dresses to their son's wedding. I told her she couldn't wear that. It was my day, and I wanted to be the one to shine. She brushed me off, telling me if I had an issue with it, I should take it up with Brian, since he was the one who took her shopping for it. I rushed into the room where Brian was getting ready, demanding that he tell his mom to take off the dress, or she wouldn't be allowed to attend the wedding. He hesitated, and just as I was about to push him, his mother walked into the room. I couldn't believe what I was hearing when he said, "You're overreacting. It's not white, it's eggshell. It's fine." My world felt like it was crashing down around me. I ran back to my room, tears streaming down my face, smearing the makeup that had taken hours to apply. I felt like I was losing control, like everything I had worked so hard for was slipping through my fingers. My thoughts raced, and I realized something. I couldn't continue like this. I had to confront Brian about how I truly felt. As I made my way back to the room, I overheard Brian and his mom talking. She called me a crybaby, questioning if he really wanted to marry someone like me. Brian, still trying to avoid conflict, told her that he loved me, but his mom wasn't done. She claimed that when she was my age, she never cried, and that real women didn't get upset over silly things like dresses or have cheap weddings. My heart sank as I listened to Brian's response. "Maybe you're right," he said. "The dress was a big deal for her, but we got her another one, so it should have been fine. As for the wedding, I just want to make everyone happy." My throat tightened, and I felt a lump of betrayal settle deep within me. I couldn't take it anymore. I walked into the room, my heart in my throat, and confronted Brian. "I won't be marrying you," I said, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. "You've allowed your mother to overstep every boundary we've set. I can't keep living like this." As I turned to leave, I heard his mom's voice behind me. "I knew it wouldn't last," she said with smug satisfaction. Brian rushed after me, desperately trying to convince me to stay. He promised he would be a better partner, that he would compromise, But all I could think about was our early conversations when we first started dating, how he had promised to support me and put me first. I knew in that moment that I was making the right decision. I couldn't keep repeating this cycle. I needed a partner who could stand by me, someone who would fight for me, not against me. Against my better judgment, I almost let him convince me to stay. He said I should also apologize to his mom for causing all the drama. That was the final straw. I told him to lose my number. I deserved better than this. Months passed, and Brian continued to call and text me from different numbers, trying to win me back. I ignored every message, focused on healing and working on myself. Slowly, my life began to improve. I started to see my worth again, to realize that I didn't need someone who couldn't support me in the way I needed. I knew that the right person, someone who would truly appreciate me, was out there, and I would be ready for them when the time came.